I don't know why Target's having a problem. I remember
a
couple of years ago, the
Target's
conservatives were mad at them, and now the liberals are mad at them. So it seems like they've swung wildly in politics.
We do know why Target's having a problem, because they've been the target of a boycott because their customers
and a couple of years ago, the conservatives were mad at them.
But clearly, the power dynamic is such that this particular boycott has had a very clear effect on their bottom line.
Okay, I'm just telling you, a couple of years ago, they had a problem with...
So Target's CEO just stepped down after the company rolled back its DEI efforts, and guess what? Sales plummeted nearly 30%. That's what happens when you alienate the very customers who built your success. When Target supported Black-owned businesses and diversity programs, profits rose. But once they backtracked, the backlash was real, and now they're paying the price. Meanwhile, companies like Apple and Costco are thriving because they stayed committed to inclusion. And when Scott Jennings tries to twist the story, Abby Phillip fires back with facts that completely torch his talking points. Let's dive in and watch how Abby Phillip shuts down Scott Jennings on Newsnight with Abby Phillip.
Tonight, abandon woke, go broke. That is how some progressives are describing the sudden announcement that Target CEO is now stepping down. The brand has taken a serious hit since rolling back its DEI efforts back in January. But unlike other companies who did the same thing, Target's commitment to diversity and inclusion programs has been ingrained in the core of its business for many years. And that included a goal to increase its Black workforce by 20% after George Floyd's murder, a commitment to add more products from Black-owned vendors to stores, and pledging millions of dollars to Black-led nonprofits. But since its policy change, Target's stock has plummeted nearly 30%, and sales, they have slumped for the third straight quarter. Black Lives Matter, their official X account, noted that Black consumers hold $1.8 trillion in spending power before saying the boycotts will continue. Joining us in our fifth seat is Sheila Kolhatkar. She is a staff writer at The New Yorker, and this is sort of the opposite of the narrative that everybody in corporate America is eager to cave because DEI is bad for business. Clearly, this really upset their customer base, and Target is paying the price for it.
Well, not every DEI program is immediately going to show up in increased profits, but in Target's case, yeah, it was actually a big success. Their program promoting Black-owned small businesses was a huge success. It drew a lot of consumers from new kind of demographic groups into the store. But we're in this environment where a lot of CEOs are bumbling around trying to figure out how to avoid drawing negative attention from this administration. They're not necessarily making business decisions based on what's good for their companies. They're trying to kind of preemptively please the president. And it's not good for business. And we're going to see a lot more stories like this where you have these kind of poorly motivated decisions, political business decisions blowing up, and CEOs resigning as a result.
I think who they're trying to please is the shareholders. I think what you're finally seeing is a shareholder revolt. Companies that are not profitable but have shareholders, they have a fiduciary obligation to their shareholders. If they're not profitable and leadership's in the way of that, you get new leadership. That's the way of the world. Corporate America is just watching their bottom line now, where for several years they were told that ESG and DEI and CRT and everything else that you could virtue signal about was the way of the future. That did not affect their bottom line. And so what we're actually seeing now is a return to actual free market capitalism. And if you're going to watch a company go down the tubes, at some point the shareholders are going to go, stop, we invested, we would prefer you make some better decisions.
Well, I feel like what you're describing is exactly the opposite of what happened to Target.
Yeah.
Because Target is actually seeing their business decline because they, rather than listening to their customers and making business decisions based on that, they made business decisions based on political backlash. Like, that's actually the opposite of what you're suggesting. And the shareholders are paying the price for it.
You know, Abby Phillip makes a really strong point here that a lot of people seem to miss. Target didn't struggle because of its DEI efforts, it actually thrived because of them. When the company pushed for more representation, featured Black-owned brands, and hired more diverse staff, customers noticed. That wasn't just virtue signaling, that was smart, values-driven marketing. Here's the thing. DEI isn't just a buzzword anymore. A 2023 McKinsey report found that companies with strong diversity initiatives outperformed their competitors by up to 36% in profitability. Why? Because inclusivity builds trust and loyalty. When people feel seen in a brand, they support it. That's what happened at Target for years. And when they suddenly pulled back, people felt alienated. And Phil Williams' take about this being a return to free market capitalism doesn't really check out. True free markets reward innovation and responsiveness. And let's be real, ignoring $1.8 trillion in black consumer spending power isn't good capitalism, it's bad math. Target's issue wasn't too much woke, it was inconsistency. You can't build a loyal customer base around community values and then abandon those same people when political pressure heats up. Consumers today care about authenticity. They'll buy from companies that stand firm, not ones that flip-flop to please everyone. So yeah, Abby's right. This wasn't a DEI failure. It was a corporate identity crisis. Target didn't go broke because it was too woke. It stumbled because it lost sight of who actually kept the lights on, the customers who believed in what it once stood for.
I mean, when you look at Target's stock from January until now, I mean, it has plummeted 28%. Mm-hmm. So most of that time, it is the backlash that is driven by the boycotts.
Yeah, Target turned on one of their huge consumer bases, which is the opposite of what Phil was saying. And it feels like conservatives spent a decade saying, go woke, go broke. Once the wokeness was removed, now Target is immediately going broke. But yeah, again, I think we'll see a lot of CEOs doing the same thing. We just saw U.S. bankruptcies at the highest rate since Trump's last presidency. We see the economy shuddering due to tariffs. We see vegetable prices going up 40%.
Why?
There are a bunch of different...
You know why?
PPI just said that vegetable price going up 40%.
Do you know why? I'm asking if you know why.
Not sure.
Storms, weather, droughts all over the world.
What about electricity prices going up 10%?
It has to be.
Do you know when Liberation Day
I think
tariffs,
if you're going to throw out Donald Trump is responsible for vegetable prices, you should come and know
Liberation
what's going
Day
on
tariffs
around the
only
world.
went into effect
But
14 days ago.
I don't know why Target's having a problem. I remember
We do know
a couple of years ago, the
Target's
conservatives were mad at them, and now the liberals are mad at them.
But
So it seems like they've swung wildly in politics.
We do know why Target's having a problem because they've been the target of a boycott because their customers
and a couple of years ago, the conservatives were mad at them.
But clearly, the power dynamic is such that this particular boycott has had a very clear effect on their bottom line.
Okay, I'm just telling you, a couple of years ago, they had a problem with it.
But I guess that's the thing. It's like if the premise is, to Adam's point, if the premise is that woke is bad for business, then why is Target struggling?
Well, I think it depends on who you are and what your brand is. I mean, it was clearly bad for Bud Light when they went down that road, and so some corporations have certainly suffered when they've gone down that road. You know, I don't know what Target's core marketing policies or principles are, but every company has to take a look at their, customer base and how they make money and make decisions based on that. It's not smart for corporations necessarily to swing wildly on the political pendulum.
Exactly.
If that is not core to your, what you're trying to.
This debate really highlights how surface level some of these go woke, go broke takes actually are. Because let's be honest, Target's problem isn't that it went too woke, it's that it backtracked and alienated the people who actually supported it. When a brand builds trust with a community, that's not politics, that's business. And here's what's wild. Research from Deloitte shows that 57% of consumers are more loyal to companies that commit to social responsibility, even if prices are slightly higher. That's not a woke fantasy. That's just market behavior. People want brands that stand for something, not ones that panic every time a hashtag trends. Scott Jennings keeps bringing up Bud Light as an example, but that's not a fair comparison. Bud Light's issue wasn't inclusivity, it was inconsistency and poor communication. Target's situation is the same story, a brand that lost its voice trying to appease everyone. At the end of the day, the economy's bigger problem isn't wokeness, it's volatility, inflation, tariffs, supply chain issues. Target just happened to become a political punching bag. Abby and Adam are right. When you abandon your values, you lose your base. Consistency builds trust, and that's something Target desperately needs to earn back.
do is
The
sell
piece is
shirts or whatever.
that
Volatility
Target, the
scares
boycott
shareholders.
started because people felt as though Target did abandon a key part of its base, a lot of black consumers, that even before the George Floyd protests and the response to that, Target was putting black-owned businesses on their shelves, and people saw themselves there, and they were purchasing, they were using their dollars to show their power. And so this conversation around woke doesn't work, and I hate that we're using that term, but what you're trying to say is DEI policies aren't working. But the reality is, if we look at, since January, the companies that have doubled down on their DEI policies, like the Costco's and the Delta Airlines and Apple, they're actually doing well. And so here's what I will say about this Target CEO stepping down. That's kind of just like smoke and mirrors. They haven't changed their policies yet. So do we know if this is going to reverse course with what
I don't
is
know that
happening
it's
at
a
the profit
sign,
dollars?
Sheila. I don't know that it's a sign, Sheila, that Target is changing course. It probably isn't necessarily, but it's a recognition that the company's performance is not what they would like it to be, it seems.
Yeah, you know, you don't have a CEO stepping down when things are going swimmingly. I mean, that is not typically what happens. But I think it's really hard to be a business leader in this environment. I mean, everything is upside down. You don't know what's going to happen from one day to the next. And I think a lot of them are being influenced by factors that are actually not related to what's best for their shareholders and the other groups who have an interest in the company doing well. They're trying to placate the president, who seems to want to put himself in the middle of all of these private companies and sort of have an influence on how they're running themselves.
This exchange between Alencia Johnson and Scott Jennings really shows the disconnect between how some people view DEI policies. Alencia's right. The data just doesn't support the idea that diversity hurts business. In fact, McKinsey's 2023 report found that companies with diverse executive teams outperform their competitors by up to 36% in profitability. That's not a small margin. That's a massive business advantage. And if we're talking about Target specifically, let's not ignore the numbers. Black consumers in the US hold $1.8 trillion in spending power. When Target invested in black-owned brands, it wasn't about politics. It was smart marketing. People felt seen. And when they rolled that back, they didn't just lose moral credibility, they lost loyal customers. Jennings says CEOs are just responding to tough conditions, but that argument misses the point. Companies like Costco, Delta, and Apple doubled down on inclusion and are still thriving. That's because DEI isn't a distraction, it's innovation. What we're really seeing here isn't a failure of wokeness, it's a failure of courage. When corporations backpedal to please critics, they forget that staying true to their values is exactly what keeps their business strong. Pause. Are you getting tired of getting half the story from biased news sources? One outlet says one thing and another says the complete opposite. How are you supposed to know what's actually true? That's where ground news comes in. It lets you compare how different media outlets, left, right, and center are covering the same story. So you can see the full picture instead of just the echo chamber. And here's the best part. Click the link in the description and get 40% off the Vantage tier, which gives you even deeper insights into media bias and political trends. Stay informed, think for yourself, and check out Ground News in the description down below.